Welcome to the deep dive.
Mhm.
Today, we're going to be looking at a really interesting topic. Anxieties that Filipinas experience when they're dating foreigners.
Yeah, it's something that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
And we've got a great source to dive into today, a YouTube video by someone called the Filipina Pea,
Yeah.
and she does not hold back.
She does not hold back.
She gets into all of it, the cultural pressures, the personal insecurities, everything.
She does, and I think one of the things that she really hits hard right at the beginning is this pressure on Filipinas to marry and have children.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just like a suggestion or a preference. It's practically like societal law.
Right.
It's like woven into the fabric of the culture.
Yeah, she calls it the married with children mantra.
And honestly, that's a perfect way to describe it.
Yeah, and she even says that by 30, if you're single and childless, you're considered leftovers.
Oh, gosh.
I know it's a lot of pressure to settle down quickly, and maybe even before you're truly ready. Yeah, and how does that then play into dating foreigners who might have a totally different timeline in mind?
That's such a good question, and it makes you wonder how much agency Filipinas feel they actually have in choosing their own path.
Right. Are they entering these relationships because they genuinely want to, or because they feel like they have to?
Right, because they feel like they should.
Yeah.
And then on top of all of that, she talks about how discussing past relationships is basically taboo in Filipino culture.
Yeah, it's this like, don't ask, don't tell policy that I think can create so much anxiety and secrecy.
Especially when you're dating foreigners who might be much more open about their past.
Yeah, and you're trying to build this foundation of trust and intimacy, but you feel like you can't be totally honest about your experiences.
And I think it leads to this pressure to present this perfect image.
Yeah, this like idealized version of yourself.
Yeah, to avoid being judged or rejected.
Right, and then it gets even more interesting when she starts talking about these physical fears that Filipinas have.
Physical.
Yes, things that like might seem small or insignificant to outsiders, but are actually huge for them.
Like what?
She mentions anxieties about things like having dark underarms,
Oh, wow.
crooked teeth,
Really?
thinking that these will make them less desirable to foreigners.
It just goes to show you the power that media and cultural narratives have on how we see ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, Filipinas are constantly bombarded with images of what's considered beautiful.
And so often that reflects Western ideals.
Exactly. And it's easy to see how those images can impact your self-esteem.
Yeah, it's this constant comparison to some unattainable standard.
And then she brings up the fear of inadequacy in bed.
Oh my gosh. Yes, it's like something straight out of a Hollywood movie.
Totally.
They're worried they can't live up to the imagined experiences that Western women supposedly provide.
It's like they're competing with this fantasy.
Yeah, and it speaks to this pressure women face around sexual performance and this need to be everything and do everything perfectly.
Right, but healthy intimacy is not about living up to some fantasy.
It's about communication and understanding and mutual pleasure.
Exactly.
And letting go of those preconceived notions.
And focusing on that real connection with your partner.
Absolutely. And then she talks about this fear of not measuring up to the sophisticated, adventurous women they assume foreigners have dated in the past.
I can see how cultural differences would feed into those anxieties.
Yeah.
It's like they're starting at a disadvantage.
Yeah, like they're already behind.
Yeah, they don't have those same experiences or opportunities.
Yeah, and then the ultimate fear, abandonment.
Oh, yeah. The fear that they'll be left for someone newer or shinier.
She compares the dating scene to a car dealership.
Oh, wow.
Where foreigners can just pick and choose.
That's a powerful image.
It is.
It really points to that power imbalance that can exist.
And this awareness of stereotypes and prejudices they might be facing.
Yeah, leading to those anxieties about being objectified or seen as disposable.
And then just when you think she's covered it all, she brings up breast size. Filipinas are apparently very aware of having smaller breasts compared to Western women.
Who knew this was such a universal insecurity?
Right. It shows how much pressure there is to conform to these idealized body standards.
No matter where you come from.
Exactly. And how these insecurities are so deeply ingrained.
And they can impact your self-esteem in a major way.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that we need to challenge these narrow definitions of beauty and promote body positivity.
Absolutely.
Self-acceptance.
Yeah, and recognizing that beauty comes in all shapes and sizes.
And that true confidence comes from within.
But she doesn't stop there. She also gets into the complexities of family dynamics.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, she talks about how Filipinas might be hesitant to introduce their foreign partners to their families.
Especially if there's a big age gap or cultural differences.
Yeah, and, family is such a central part of Filipino culture.
Absolutely.
So it's understandable why there would be so much anxiety around that.
Yeah, there's this pressure to meet those family expectations.
Yeah, and to gain their approval.
And the fear of being judged or rejected by your loved ones can be so daunting.
It's like they're trying to balance their own desires with the weight of family traditions and expectations.
Yeah, and then you add in the potential for cultural clashes.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when it comes to things like language barriers or just different social customs.
It's a lot to handle.
It really is.
It's no wonder that these anxieties can cast such a shadow over the whole dating experience.
It's like trying to build a relationship on two different foundations.
Yeah.
Each with its own set of rules and expectations.
But even with all of these anxieties, there's another side to this story, right?
Right. The Filipina Pea doesn't just focus on the negative.
Yeah.
She also highlights those strengths and that resilience of Filipinas.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that in the next part because I think that's really important to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a whole other layer to this conversation.
Exactly. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so we just talked about all these anxieties that Filipinos face when they're dating foreigners, all the cultural differences, the family dynamics. It can get pretty heavy.
Yeah, but it's not the whole story, is it?
Right.
I mean, Filipino culture is also rich with these amazing values that really foster strong and loving connections.
Yeah, the Filipina piece specifically mentions how Filipinos are raised with this deep sense of family loyalty commitment.
And those aren't just like abstract ideas. They're like literally woven into how they're brought up.
And that strong family foundation, it could be such an anchor in a relationship, right?
Absolutely.
Especially when you're dealing with those choppy waters of cultural differences or those personal insecurities.
Exactly. It's like having this built-in support system.
Yeah.
This network of love and understanding that helps you get through tough times.
Yeah, and it goes beyond family, too.
Right.
Filipino culture also places so much emphasis on hospitality, warmth, genuine care for others.
It's part of the fabric of their society.
Right. Yeah, and those qualities really shine through in how they approach relationships.
Yeah, there's a depth there.
Yeah.
A real genuine kindness and compassion.
And I think that's what makes Filipinas so captivating to so many foreigners.
It's not just about the exotic appeal or anything like that. It's about the heart and the soul that they bring to the table.
And I think that's really important to remember in this conversation.
Absolutely.
It's about recognizing that they're not just defined by these anxieties, but by their incredible strengths.
And the richness of their culture.
Right. There's this vibrancy there, this warmth that often gets overlooked when we talk about intercultural dating.
You're right.
So let's go back to those anxieties for a second.
Okay.
Because the Filipina Pea uses this really powerful image to describe the fear of abandonment.
What's that?
The analogy of the car dealership.
Oh, yeah, where Filipinas fear being traded in for a newer model.
Exactly.
Wow. It's so...
It is right. It gets to the heart of that feeling of being disposable.
Yeah.
Of being constantly compared to others.
And when you factor in cultural differences and power dynamics,
Yeah.
it just amplifies those fears.
It's like they're always on edge.
Yeah, always waiting for the other shoe to drop.
And that constant anxiety, it can be so draining, especially when you're trying to build a foundation of trust.
Absolutely.
So it's important for the foreign partner to be sensitive to that.
Right, and to understand where these fears are coming from.
Yeah, it's not about dismissing their concerns.
No.
It's about acknowledging them, validating them, creating a space where they feel safe to be vulnerable.
And that's where open communication is so important.
Yeah, communication is key.
It's not just about talking. It's about really listening.
Yeah.
Truly hearing and understanding what your partner is saying.
And feeling.
And feeling right.
Yeah.
It's about being present, being attuned to the emotional landscape of your relationship.
And building that emotional intelligence.
Yeah, that ability to connect on a deeper level.
And that's where cultural sensitivity comes in, right?
Absolutely.
It's about understanding that different cultures have different ways of expressing their emotions.
Different comfort levels with vulnerability.
Yeah, and it's about being mindful of those differences, not trying to impose your own cultural expectations on your partner.
Right. Respecting those nuances.
Yeah. And the Filipina Pea brings up something that I think is really interesting and often gets overlooked.
What's that?
She talks about how Filipinas might feel self-conscious about their English skills.
Even though they probably speak English better than their partner speaks Tagalog.
Exactly.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, because it speaks to the power dynamics that are at play.
Yeah.
Even if they're fluent in English, they might still feel judged or underestimated.
Yeah, especially if their partner doesn't even try to learn their language.
Or understand their culture.
Right. It's like there's this expectation that they have to assimilate.
Yeah.
Adapt to the foreign partner's world.
And it should be a two-way street.
Absolutely. It takes effort from both sides.
So it's about reciprocity. Both partners making an effort to bridge that cultural gap.
To show respect for each other's language and culture and experiences.
And to create a relationship where both individuals feel valued and understood.
Yes, where they can both be themselves.
Now, the Filipina Pea also talks about the anxieties that come with having children from previous relationships.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
And it's like there's a stigma attached to it.
There is.
Even though it's a common reality for many Filipinas.
Yeah, and I think that stigma comes from these traditional views on family structure.
Right, and this pressure on women to conform to certain expectations.
Oh, yeah, it's so outdated.
It is, and it's important to remember that family structures and relationship histories are diverse.
Yeah.
They're all valid.
And judging someone based on their past prevents you from really connecting with them.
It really does. It's about recognizing that everyone has a story.
Exactly. And those stories shape who we are.
Yeah.
But they don't define us.
And it's about approaching those stories with empathy and understanding, not judgment.
Right. It's about seeing the individual, the woman who has been through a lot.
Who has navigated life's complexities with strength and resilience.
Exactly.
And it's about understanding that love doesn't discriminate.
Right.
It doesn't care about past relationships or family structures.
It's about embracing the whole person.
Their past, their present, their future.
And that kind of acceptance, that willingness to see beyond those societal expectations, that's powerful.
It is.
That's what builds a strong foundation for a relationship.
Absolutely. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the physical insecurities that she mentions.
Okay.
She talks about Filipinas worrying about things like dark underarms, crooked teeth.
Yeah.
Feeling like these features make them less attractive to foreigners.
It's amazing how these seemingly small things can have such a huge impact on self-esteem.
It is. And it really highlights the power of those societal beauty standards.
Yeah.
And how those standards differ across cultures. Filipinos are bombarded with these images that promote a very specific, often westernized ideal of beauty.
Right. And it's easy to see how those images can make you feel insecure.
Yeah. Even about features that are perfectly natural and beautiful.
Yeah, it's like they're constantly comparing themselves to this airbrushed, unattainable standard.
Yeah.
And that's so damaging.
It is.
It's so important to challenge those narrow definitions of beauty.
Yeah, promote self-acceptance, body positivity.
Absolutely. Recognizing that beauty comes in all shapes, sizes, colors.
Yeah, and that true confidence comes from embracing your unique qualities.
It's about loving and appreciating yourself for who you are.
Exactly.
Not what society tells you should look like.
And creating a space in relationships where you can be open about those insecurities.
Yeah.
And receive support, not judgment.
Absolutely. It's about celebrating each other's unique beauty.
Inside and out.
Inside and out, yeah.
Now, she also talks about the anxieties around intimacy.
Okay.
She mentions this fear of inadequacy in bed, worrying that they can't live up to these imagined exotic experiences
that Western women supposedly provide.
Right. It's almost comical how these stereotypes and fantasies can affect how we view intimacy.
It is.
It's like they're trying to follow a script that someone else wrote.
Yeah.
Instead of focusing on their own desires and experiences.
And that pressure can really kill the mood.
It can.
Healthy intimacy is not about performing.
No.
It's not about conforming to some preconceived notion.
It's about connecting with your partner.
Exactly.
Exploring each other's bodies and desires with respect and curiosity.
Being present, being authentic, enjoying the experience together.
Not worrying about living up to some unrealistic ideal.
Right.
So we've covered a lot here.
We have.
And the Filipina Pea has given us a lot to think about.
It has.
We've explored the anxieties, the cultural differences, the power dynamics.
Yeah.
But amidst all those challenges, we've also seen those incredible strengths.
Yeah.
That resilience that Filipino women bring to relationships.
That's right. It's important to remember that.
It is.
It's not just about focusing on one side or the other. It's about recognizing the complexity of these experiences.
It's about seeing them as whole individuals with their own unique stories.
Hopes, fears, desires.
Yeah.
And it's about approaching these relationships with sensitivity. Understanding a willingness to learn and grow together.
And with that in mind, we're going to shift our focus in the next part.
Okay.
We're going to talk about some practical tips and insights for building healthy, fulfilling relationships.
Regardless of your cultural background.
Yeah, exactly. We'll explore how to navigate those tricky conversations, bridge those cultural gaps, and create a foundation of trust and intimacy.
I'm looking forward to it.
So stay tuned. So we've really gotten into the emotional side of things, the anxieties, the challenges. But now I want to shift gears a bit and talk about what you can actually do with this information.
Yeah, how do you actually put these insights into action?
Exactly. Especially if you're someone who is interested in dating a Filipina.
Well, I think the first step is really acknowledging that those anxieties exist.
Right.
Don't just dismiss them as silly or overblown.
Yeah, they're often rooted in real experiences and cultural pressures.
Exactly. So it's about validating her feelings, not trying to fix them or tell her she's wrong for feeling that way.
So how do you do that?
Well, ask questions,
Okay.
but not in like an interrogating way,
Right.
but with a genuine desire to understand her perspective.
Okay.
What has she been told about dating foreigners? What are her specific concerns?
So it's about making her feel seen and heard.
Exactly. Not just like another Filipina you've encountered.
Right, and that's where patience comes in, right?
Oh, absolutely, because cultural norms around communication can be so different.
Yeah.
She might not be as direct or confrontational as you're used to.
So it's about paying attention to those subtle cues, reading between the lines.
And understanding that silence can speak volumes.
Yes, and speaking of communication,
Yeah.
you have to be mindful of the power dynamic that can exist.
Right, especially in the Philippines.
Even if her English is excellent.
Yeah.
Using overly complex vocabulary or slang,
Yeah.
it can make her feel self-conscious or put on the spot,
It's about meeting her where she's at.
linguistically and emotionally.
Exactly. Making her feel comfortable enough to be herself.
And this is where I think actions speak louder than words.
Oh, for sure.
The Filipina Pea really emphasizes consistency
As being key.
to easing those abandonment fears.
Yeah. It's not about those grand gestures. It's about those little things that show you're invested.
For the long haul.
Exactly. Being reliable, following through on your promises, showing up when you say you will.
And engaging with her family and culture.
Yeah, those are the things that build trust over time.
And it's a process, right?
Absolutely. It's not a quick fix.
It takes time and effort from both sides.
To unlearn those deeply ingrained fears.
It's a journey you're embarking on together.
Not a destination you reach overnight.
Now, she also touched on something that I think is really important. The inherent power balance that can exist in these relationships.
Yeah, how can someone who's not a Filipina be more aware of that?
And act accordingly.
I think it starts with acknowledging your own privilege.
Okay.
As a foreigner, you probably have more financial resources, freedom of movement, cultural capital.
Especially in the Philippines.
Exactly. So be mindful of how that can affect the dynamic.
So being aware of how those differences might be perceived.
Yeah, and avoiding anything that could be interpreted as taking advantage.
And check your assumptions at the door.
Right. Don't treat her like she represents all Filipinas.
Yeah.
Or project your own cultural expectations onto her.
It's about seeing her as an individual.
Exactly, with her own unique thoughts, feelings, experiences.
Not an exotic object.
Yeah, or a cultural ambassador.
And encourage her to voice her needs and boundaries.
Yes, and respect them.
Don't assume you know what she wants or needs just because of her background.
It's about creating a partnership where both people feel safe, respected, empowered to be themselves.
And I think it's interesting because some of the anxieties she describes, they resonate with anyone dating someone from a different culture.
That's so true. It's about those universal anxieties of stepping outside your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Facing the unknown.
And I think by understanding those anxieties, we can approach all relationships with more empathy and understanding.
And build connections that are more authentic and meaningful.
Isn't that what we're all looking for?
I think so.
Well, there you have it. Your deep dive into the anxieties Filipinas experience when dating foreigners.
It's complicated, right?
It is.
There are cultural expectations, personal insecurities, those universal relationship fears.
Ooh, but I think the key takeaway here is that with awareness, empathy, and open communication, those anxieties don't have to be roadblocks.
They can be starting points for conversations that deepen understanding.
And create connections that are powerful and enduring.
That's a great way to put it.
Keep those insights in mind as you continue your journey